a lot of rest for these guys,
Mm-hmm.
particularly Sergei Bobrovsky. It's going to be 10 days since they last played. That can hurt them or help them. We're not sure, but let's ask our next guest, Steven Psihogios of NorthStar Bets. Stevie, you think the 10 days rest is going to hurt Bobrovsky?
I don't think it's going to hurt. I think later in the postseason is when you want to have the rest. I think when you get into trouble is that early postseason, like after the first round, the number one seed sweeps through the first round, and then you get that, that 7 or 6 seed that had to play 7 games to figure it all out. I think that's when it hurts. And also when the other team hasn't had almost half as much rest as you have. I mean, sure, Florida's been off for 10 days, but Vegas, I don't even remember what happened the last time they played. It's been that long. Obviously, joking. I know they won, but still, it has been a long time. You got to kind of scratch your head to think about it when thinking about the last NHL game we saw.
I think last time they played, Brian Bellows was their captain.
Holy smokes! What a show
what
that
it feels
is.
like. Yeah, Ed Jovanovski was on the back end there. Yeah,
I wonder if Joe Volkov will be in attendance. He has to.
He lives in Arizona now.
Yeah, but he played for
well, he can fly in.
He's a former Canuck. He's a former Canuck at the end of the day, more than anything else.
Okay. Anyway.
All right, let's next question. Sorry,
We're
very rude, Stephen. Very rude indeed. And listen, I'm reading the previews, right? And people are saying, oh, well, the experience of Vegas, they were there just a couple of years ago. Only 6 of those players remain, I believe, in that team. Is this being blown out of proportion too much, do you think?
Yeah, the experience thing I throw out the window. I don't look into that much at all. The one thing I think if you're going to look at it and say those experienced players and how they can be a difference maker in this series is you look at the third line. That's where basically Vegas has shunned all the remaining players from their original season. And you got guys like William Karlsson and Riley Smith. Those are the 2 players that have been really, I think, elevating their game and give Vegas depth up front, something that I don't think the Florida Panthers have all that much of. So I don't look at it as an experience thing when I look at the original misfits on this Vegas team, but I look at it as more of a depth thing because now they're stepping into these secondary roles opposed to when they went on their original cup run when they were kind of shouldering the bulk of the workload.
Stevie, when you look at both these teams and how they got to the finals, of course, Florida had to go through your Boston Bruins, the record-setting Boston Bruins, one of the worst choke jobs in NHL history. Sorry for bringing that up again. The Toronto Maple Leafs.
You remember he's our guest, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. I know. I'm sorry. The Carolina Hurricanes, and of course, then Vegas had to go through the Oilers, and then the Stars, then the Winnipeg Jets, who basically quit. Who do you think had the tougher route to the finals, though?
Oh, it's definitely Florida. I mean, you look at the regular season points race, you have 1, 2, 3 all lined up for the Panthers, and they knocked them down like bottles at some summer carnival game. Like they just went right through them, especially the last 2. The Leafs and Carolina, like in 9 games, just wiped their hands with both those teams. But you say that, it's easy to kind of look macro level and say that because they did it in 5 and 4 games respectively against the Leafs and the Hurricanes. But then you look, it's all 1-goal games. The Panthers have 3 games by 2+ goals that they've won this postseason. I think Vegas has like 8 or 9. So when you're talking about the tougher road, it's definitely Florida, not just because of the quality of opponent, but they've played every game, every night that they play. It's a battle. Like it's getting to 2 goals might get you the win because Bobrovsky's not giving up much. And the offense, it's not like they're setting the world on fire either. I think depth scoring has been a major issue for this Florida team, and it hasn't bit them just yet. But I think it will in the Stanley Cup final.
All right, so we're talking to Steven Psihogios of NorthStar Bets. Stevie's got a piece up on northstarbets.ca previewing the finals and some bets. And one that's really popping up to me, Stevie, you're one of your best bets, total games under 5.5, plus 145. You think it's going to be a short one?
I think Vegas wins this in short order. You look at Carolina, that was a team, forget depth scoring. They just didn't have the guns to go offensively in that series. No Svechnikov, Pacioretty was out, Teravainen, who knows how healthy he was. He was basically a non-factor that entire series. They just didn't have the offensive guns to go toe-to-toe. You could say the same thing about the Maple Leafs. Sure, they have the top scores. They have the high-end scores, but depth scoring, I think, was a question mark on the Maple Leafs. And while they did get some depth scoring, it wasn't enough to sustain throughout the entire series. Look at William Karlsson, what he's done this postseason. He's centering that third line for Vegas. He's tied for the playoffs lead in even strength goals with 9. That is a game-breaking, difference-making third line with Riley Smith and Michael Amadio also on that unit. I think Florida has not gone up against a team that can really roll 3 lines like this and also have one real good scoring line, which didn't score much in the conference finals, but I think we can both agree, or all of us can agree, that that's going to change. I think Eichel's not going to go goalless in this Stanley Cup final. I think him and Mark Stone have a little bit more offensive success.
Yeah, Vegas have 16 goal scorers. And how about a quiet 10 goals by Wild Bill Sharms? 10 goals, 4 assists for him.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, you mentioned Carlson there and Master Show and even Kachuk on the other side. Whose stock's risen the most, do you think, in this Stanley Cup run? Because, I mean, Kachuk was a star, maybe a superstar before, but these guys have just gone to a different level, it seems. Who do you say his stock has gone highest?
From the Panthers, I'm going to go Carter Verhaeghe. This was someone who scored 40 goals, but was just a very quiet 40-goal scorer. No one was talking about Verhaeghe having a breakout year. But you look at how well he's played, and he's one of the few guys on the Panthers that's not on that top power play unit that's producing offensively. So I tip my hat to Verhaeghe because he's been sensational. On the Vegas side of things, I think Jonathan Marchessault, he just has scored so many clutch goals and has been a consistent contributor, especially in that last series when you had Eichel not score a goal. Mark Stone went 3 or 4 games to close out that series without scoring. You had their big guns offensively go quiet, but it was Jonathan Marchessault doing a lot of the dirty work and stepping up in those big moments. So I think if you're looking for one on each side, those are the two I would say who have really elevated their stock in the playoffs.
I want to talk about Jack Eichel. Of course, he was the big prized acquisition for the Vegas Golden Knights. Brought in for moments like this. Of course, never played in the playoffs in Buffalo. Is he the key factor or the driving force for this Vegas team if they want to capture the Stanley Cup?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think he needs to have a 6-7 goal Stanley Cup final for Vegas to win. They just beat a very good Dallas team, and he never even lit the lamp. So I don't think that's going to change in a series that should be even more low scoring against Florida when you look at how they're winning games. Like, this is going to be 2-1, 3-2 every single night. The Panthers, their secret to success is just hope Bobrovsky shows up that night, because they still, in the playoffs, are giving up the most shots per game. That's impressively bad when you consider that you have teams that only played like 4 or 5 games in the first round, or have only played like less than 10 games in the playoffs, and it's easier to skew those numbers with 1 or 2 bad games. Florida still has allowed the most shots per game of any team in the playoffs, and that's a bit concerning. So the key to victory for Florida is Bobrovsky standing on his head, which at this point we just have to assume is going to happen. And the key for success is Vegas is also getting good goaltending. Adin Hill has a better save percentage than Sergei Bobrovsky, and they can score with 3 different lines of Vegas. And I think that's the biggest difference between Vegas and Florida, and why I think they have more room for error than the Panthers do.
All right, we're speaking to Stevie Psihogios of NorthStar Bets. Let's talk Conn Smythe. I know we did last time, but obviously numbers are changing. Money's coming down. A lot of people that I talk to, for whatever reason, seem to believe if Vegas win the Stanley Cup, it's Jack Eichel's Conn Smythe, which I think is crazy to me. You can see by his number on NorthStar Bets right now, plus 375. So money is coming in on him. At the top, Bobrovsky, I think rightfully so, plus 215. But are you with me in thinking that, like, listen, even if Jack Eichel scores a goal in every single game, I still don't think he wins the Conn Smythe here. I think it's Marchessault's, maybe Mark Stone's, or even Adin Hill's.
If he scores in every single game, I think he does enough to remove the narrative that, he didn't get anything at the conference final. But he needs a big Stanley Cup final, in my opinion, in order to be the X factor. I think it's going to be Adin Hill at 13-1. I mentioned this is going to be a low-scoring series, which means the pressure is going to be on the goalies. And we already have a goalie in Adin Hill who has performed by save percentage better than Sergei Bobrovsky. Again, the argument can be made that Hill hasn't played the entire playoffs. Neither has Bobrovsky. I know it's been a while, but if you remember, he didn't get to start those first 3-4 games against the Boston Bruins. That was Alex Lyon. So if you want to knock Hill for not playing the entire playoffs, you kind of have to use that same argument against Bobrovsky. And when it's going to be these low-scoring games, you're not going to have anybody putting up, I think, gaudy point total or gaudy goal totals in the Stanley Cup final. It's really going to come down to the goalies. And Hill, as we saw him do in that Game 6, has shown that he can rise to the occasion. I mean, he shuts out the Dallas Stars in a clinching game. I don't think Adin Hill right now is priced where he should be. And if you can get him right now at NorthStar Bets at 13-1, that's a bet I'm making 100%.
Yeah, I like that too. If you look at past Conn Smythe winners, it's really favorable to defensemen and goaltending. So I'm with you with Aiden Hill and Bobrovsky. I just don't like that plus 215.
Do you agree, Stevie, that when you're voting for the Conn Smythe Award, it's like 50% what happens in the finals themselves, in the final 7 games potentially, and then 50% in the previous 3 rounds. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely more that final is more weight. It's like an exam, right? I remember in high school or university, whatever it was, that exam was weighted like 30-40%. It was the last thing you did.
So unfair.
Yeah, it was so unfair, but it really like it exactly like it doesn't mean anything really in the whole scheme of things, because it's just whatever you can remember kind of at the end of the school year. You forget about it like a week later. If you were to write that same exam again, your mark would be like 40% points lower. Like Aiden Hill, he could have a fantastic Stanley Cup final. He'll sign somewhere in the offseason and not be anywhere near as good as this. Like, this is just a crazy run we're seeing him on. And so I think a little weight you could put in that. Look at a guy like Jordan Binnington. He aced the exam. He 100% aced the exam. Ever since then, the guy's flunking. And he's starting fights in the hallways. Like, he's been a total example of a bad student. So I agree. I think the Conn Smythe Trophy, a lot of it is what you do in that Stanley Cup final, and a little bit, you have to at least carry water, I'd say, through the first 3 rounds. But yeah, a lot of it is how you perform on that final exam.
Man, if that's criteria, there's no chance I'm ever winning Conn Smythe. I failed all those things.
Crumble under pressure.
Okay, quickly, let's talk about game 1. You have the Vegas Golden Knights minus 130 on the money line and plus 107 for Panthers. Which way are you leaning here?
In game 1, I think that's a game where it can go a little bit more either way, but I'm still going to go Vegas here at minus 130. They've been really good at home in the playoffs, and I do worry a little if rust is going to show for the Panthers from that time off. It's going to be in that game 1. So I think if at any game you expect maybe a bit of a letdown from Florida, or they don't just match Vegas's energy, it would be in that game 1. Like I said, I like Vegas in 5 or less in this series. So more nights than not, I'm going to pick Vegas to win here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm on Vegas as well. Stevie, thanks so much for doing this, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks. Enjoy the Stanley Cup final, guys.
You too. All the best. That's Steven Psihogios of NorthStar Bets. Make sure you head over to northstarbets.ca. Check out his Stanley Cup Finals preview. A lot of good stuff in there.